art studio, we're going to learn how to create a basic, simple pillow. You can make a pillow any shape that you want as long as it's simple. This one is reversible. It does not have to be though. We're going to learn a basic straight stitch, and we're going to learn some beginner sewing knots. All right, to begin we need paper to draw a simple pattern on. I've created a heart, which is what I'm going to use today. A raindrop, a small square pillow, a rectangular pillow. So on any paper, you can decide what shape you would like your pillow. Draw it on the paper. Add a space about 3 inches or so where you mark what that space is so that it will be left open when you sew, so that you can turn your work right side out and so you can stuff it with stuffing. Next, you need 2 pieces of fabric. I have this cute dog fabric, and similar but not the same, I chose a color group that was similar to what is on the dog pattern, but my pillow will be reversible. You can choose 2 different fabrics or 2 of the same, but they need to fit your pattern easily on top. Next, you take your fabrics and you place them right side to right side. You want the good sides facing each other, facing in. And here I'm noting that the edge is no good. So just so I remember not to put my pattern all the way over there, I'm going to go like that. You're then going to take your pattern and place it so that it fits well on the fabric. However, you do not want to be too close to the edge, and you also don't want to just stick it right in the middle, because then all of this fabric is wasted. Whereas if we keep it near an edge, the fabric on the other side can be used by somebody else or you later on. Once you have it lined up, you're going to trace it. I'm using a pencil, but if it's a fabric that pencil does not show up on, you can get a colored pencil. You can also get a marker. Just beware, you also don't want it to show through on your finished pillow. That does not show up enough. However, it will show up on this, so I'm going to use that. So you hold your pattern still. If you find that you're going to have a problem holding your pattern still to trace around it, you can also pin it in place. You should have straight pins available anyway. If you want to make sure it doesn't move around on you, you can pin through all layers, paper, fabric, and fabric, just to hold it still while you trace around. Ah, that shows up much better. Another solution to that problem would have been to get a marker or a light, like white or yellow, colored pencil. Great. Now I do not, oh wait, I do need my pencil. I want to continue these lines for my leave open area onto the fabric. Right? Then remove the pin, remove the pattern, and put it aside to use again or for someone else to use. Now we have the heart traced, but we have to pin our two pieces of fabric together so that we can continue. When you are pinning should happen flat on the table. You're going down through both layers of fabric. You can pin right on the pencil line. That'll remind you that you need to leave yourself room to cut farther away from there in a moment. So up close, like I said, you should do this flat on the table, but in order to show you, up close, you're going down through both layers of fabric, see, on the other side, and then back up through both layers of fabric. So on the front, you can see the pin head and the point of the pin, and on the back, you see what looks almost like a staple. And that holds it together while you do your sewing later. And I'm going to continue to pin every inch or so around the entire thing, except I'm going to stop at that line. So I'm going to pin from the beginning where one line of the opening is. Then I'm going to stop when I get to here, so I have that left open. Now that I have everything pinned that I need, I'm going to cut this out. I'm use my fabric scissors, and I'm going to cut out while leaving seam allowance. Seam allowance means that you are cutting a little bit, about a ½ inch, outside of where your line is, so that when you sew, you've got this extra fabric to keep the stitches from pulling right out of your work. And I'm going to keep these pieces as large as possible, knowing that other people might use them. So from here, all right, now I'm ready to sew. I'm going to take my pin cushion, and I'm going to use a regular needle for standard thread, because I'm using thread that is tiny. I need a needle that has a small eye or opening. Sewing needles have an eye so that you can thread your thread through it. Pins, these are called straight pins, have the pin head and the point. Larger needles like this that have this big giant eye, that's not for sewing regular fabric. That's for using yarn or really thick string to add detail or embroidery to artwork. To thread your needle, find the end of your thread. Carefully line it up with the eye of the needle and push it through. You want to have your fingers near the end of the thread, because if you have your fingers too far away, like trying to thread it like that, it's all floppy. That doesn't work. You need it to be up nice and close so that it stays where you want it as you thread your needle. Then you are going to take your thread and keep pulling, doubling your thread till it seems like you've got about as much as you need to finish sewing around whatever pattern you've chosen. Then when I find where my threads are the same length, I cut. chose red thread so that it would show up on the video, but also because it is a color on one of the fabrics, so it will also match. Now, to begin sewing, you need a knot. There are two ways to do this. You can tie a knot at the end of your thread and use that, or you can tie a knot right in the beginning of your pillow. I'm going to show both. The first way, you take your thread, you hold it carefully at the end of your sewing needle, and then on the other side, you wrap fully around twice. 1, 2, more if you need a bigger knot. And then you take that thread between your fingers and you hold it tight while you pull it carefully all the way through. And you end up with a nice, perfect little knot here. Now, some types of fabric, if you do that and then you begin to sew and you pull too hard, that knot will come right through the fabric if it's more of an open weave fabric. So I'm going to show you another way. I'm just going to cut this knot off and start fresh. Okay. Another way, especially if you're a beginner at sewing, is to go right to where you're going to start sewing, which is at this very first pin. When you arrive at a pin, you can remove it. So even though I'm just starting, I'm going to remove this pin, put it right back in the pin box so that it doesn't end up in any strange place. And then going down through both fabrics and back up just a tiny little bit. You can see how little it is on the back. And then pull your string, your thread, until you have just enough at the end that you can grab it and hold it to tie. And then just like starting to tie your shoes, you take one in each hand and you go around and through the loop, pull it tight. Do that a second time. You have a very sturdy knot that will not come out. I always do a third just in case. Okay. Let's see those knots again up close. First one, hold carefully here, and then wrap around your sewing needle. 1, 2, 3. And then you're pushing that down into your grasp and then holding it tight while you pull the thread through. There's one knot. And then I'm going to cut it off in order to show the next. To begin, remove the pin where you're starting and sew one stitch down through both pieces of fabric and back up. Leaving enough of a tail of thread for you to grasp and tie your knot. This is a very basic knot, like starting to tie shoes. Around and through the loop. Pull it tight and do it again. And then that last time just in case. And then you proceed with your sewing. Now for our sewing. This is a straight stitch. This is the very most basic sewing stitch, where you're going down through both layers and back up. Down through both layers and back up. small, 1/8 to 1/4 inch for each stitch. If you make big stitches, then when you flip your pillow right side out in order to stuff it, you'll have big gaps at the edge and the stuffing will just come right out. I usually will put my finger here when I pull the thread through so that it won't tangle up on me. And continue to sew like that around all the way until you get to this other line here to remind you to stop for flipping and stuffing. Down and up through both. And once you get going, you can do a couple of stitches at a time that way. At the corner, when I flip this right side out, this here needs to be cut a little bit lower, not all the way, but lower so that it'll form a proper heart shape when I flip it. So I'm going to snip, and that goes for any tight corner like that, in any shape. And continue. Okay, so I happen to have taken enough thread to tie a nice knot. If you end up, before you get to the end where you need to stop, if you find that you have about 5 inches of thread left and you're starting to run out, you need to end it and get more thread. In order to tie a proper knot, you need about this much thread left. So do not sew all the way to your needle, because you have to take some out. So you want to stop at the right time. I have extra, that's good too. So now to tie our ending knot at the end of our straight stitch, you want to go through your last stitch, you find a loop, then you go to the cross to the other side and under the loop. Then again, under that same stitch, and then up through the loop, pull tight. It's a nice sturdy knot. Then you're going to trim just above the knot with your scissors. Always place your needle somewhere that it's easy to find next time you need it, preferably in a pincushion. Let's see that knot again up closer. Carefully under your previous stitch. Across. And up from underneath with your needle through the loop. That's a nice strong knot, and I always go through again one more time just in case anything unravels. Up through, pull it tight, and then trim near the knot but not right at it. Now I have left my opening here, I have to carefully flip this right side out. You want to start by putting your thumbs into the opening, edging a little bit at a time through. Take your time and be patient with yourself. I'm using my fingers on the inside to go along the seam I have just created to make sure that I have pushed all of the fabric all the way out to the thread so that my heart shape, or whichever shape I've chosen, looks the way it's supposed to. When I stuff this, it will look even better. Next step, fiber fill, also known as stuffing. So from the box of stuffing, I'm just start to grab the fluff I think I will need. Fill my pillow. I can stuff it lightly so that it's very squishy, or I can stuff it more so that it's more firm. The choice is yours. Next, you need to pin the section here so that you can hand sew it from the outside. So carefully fold under your seam allowance so that it lines up with where you stopped stitching before. You do need to pin it so that it stays together while you work. There. And once we have it where we need it, I have enough thread left on my needle, I believe, to finish this up. So because I want the end to be hidden, I'm going to make the knot this way, 3 times around, pinch between my fingers, and pull while still pinching. Then I'm going to go from the inside up through like that so that the knot will be inside of the pillow, not showing on the outside. I turned the direction because I'm right-handed and I want to sew from right to left because that feels more natural for me. And now I can sew. I'm looking for the top of each fold and going back and forth, a little stitch on this side to a little stitch on that side, and pull through. A little stitch on this side, I'm careful not to poke myself in the finger. A little stitch on that side. All the way across just like that. A little bit here, a little bit there. Great. One final thing. One more knot. So So at the very end, my final stitch, I'm going to do the same as last time, where I'm going under the last prior stitch, and then under and up through that loop to create a knot. And for extra security, under this stitch that was just created, and then under and up through that loop again. Now to hide that knot as much as possible, I take one last step. I take my needle, right here, right as close as I can to that stitch, I'm gonna go down into my work and back out somewhere random nearby. And then, grabbing my scissor, I'm going to pull a little too much so that when I cut this, it will disappear into the pillow. See? You can't see where the needle came out at all. Little extra stuffing there. And we have a lovely pillow.